Tánaiste, today you intend ramming the Water Services Amendment Bill, or the Septic Tank Bill as it's known, through the Dáil, a measure that you know will impose great hardship on citizens in this state. I think the use of the guillotine to rush this measure through is cynical. You said a few moments ago that you were open to constructive suggestions in respect of any proposals, but in this particular case, you are rushing this legislation through without having taken or considered the very constructive and fair amendments brought by members of this Dáil. Now, I'm aware that the reality of what's happening today stems from a failure of successive governments, it has to be said, of Fianna Fáil, of Fine Gael and Labour, who failed to comply with the 1975 EU directive. And unfortunately today, what this Dáil tells rural Ireland is that it is the people who will pay for the failure of politics. This legislation should not go through without the full standards by which septic tanks will be assessed being agreed, published and understood, because in the absence of that, fear and panic has spread right across rural Ireland.
Please.
People fear that they will be faced. People fear that they will be faced with bills of several thousand euros that they simply cannot meet.
Order for the Speaker, please.
And Tánaiste, I, like you, support any measure that means that individuals and families, as you have just said, can see their way beyond hardship and debt.
Yes.
However,
Deputy,
this particular measure, advanced in the manner in which you had advanced it, not only causes the fear of further debt, but will in fact bring that reality. So I want to ask you, Tánaiste, how you defend a position that you will rush this legislation through without publishing the standards by which these septic tanks will be judged, and without crucially offering the reassurance to families and individuals that there will be a fully funded grant scheme to support those families should they have to make repair works to their septic tanks.
Tánaiste to reply. Stop it. Deputy, that's enough.
And that is all.
Deputy, please. Tánaiste.
Well, I think it's a pity that Deputy McDonald doesn't have the good grace, as Deputy O'Keefe did, to at least acknowledge that the government is dealing with a real issue that families are concerned about and have been concerned about in this country, which is the problem of mortgage debt, and which he, of course, came in here previously and said the government is doing nothing about the mortgage problem and so on. And on the day that we are, doesn't have the good grace to come in and at least acknowledge that, and has to spend all morning trying to find what issue can she find that she can criticise the government on. Now she says, Deputy McDonald says that the government is rushing this and we're not giving members of the House an opportunity to debate it in detail and so on. Can I tell her that when this bill was before the committee finished 3 hours early, Deputy McDonald. You have three, please. Deputy McDonald, 3 extra hours in which you could have raised all these issues. This issue, alas, Cancora. This issue, alas, Cancora, is this issue arose.
Just one moment, Tánaiste. I want no more of this farce now. This proper disgrace. I want Tánaiste to finish.
The National Parliament.
This issue dates back to 2009 and was not dealt with by the previous government. There is now a 3rd of February deadline within which the Water Services Bill must be enacted. We are facing a situation where the country is facing the possibility of fines, a lump sum penalty of €2.7 million and daily fines of more than €26,000 if this legislation is not enacted and the way of dealing with septic tanks is not put in place. Now again, what the government is proposing is a reasonable measure. It's a once-off registration charge of €50 and it is an inspection regime that is quite reasonable, and we've in fact already seen in County Cavan an example of how that inspection regime has operated. It operates in a very reasonable way, and the legislation isn't being rushed. There has been plenty of time provided for it, and it has to be enacted by the 3rd of February.
Tánaiste. A supplementary question now from Deputy Mary Lou McDonald.
Now, some in this House might find this a source of comedy. Can I just remind members that a lot of people who are currently watching us and that we represent don't find this a matter that is funny at all. There isn't a person who doesn't accept, Tánaiste, that we have to guard the quality of our water and that you need a proper inspection regime. That's not the issue. And in fact, the registration fee itself isn't what's causing the difficulty. The problem is that the legislation that you are rushing through, and I repeat, you failed to take amendments from Sinn Féin and indeed from others on these matters, is very explicit, for instance, in the fact that up to €5,000 of a fine can be levied. There's no fudging on that. That's there black on white. But it is the absence of a spelt-out series of standards that will apply to the septic tanks that causes people deep concern. It is also the fact that should a household be faced with significant works to bring the septic tank up to standard, that the state is making absolutely no commitment to those families, the length and breadth of the state, that there will be a helping hand for them. Now, there's little point, Tánaiste, there's little point, Tánaiste, giving with one hand and taking back with another. And I will always acknowledge any effort that is made to assist families that are in financial distress. And we will read very carefully your proposals that have been discussed here this morning. Let me acknowledge them. But let me tell you also that it is unfair, deeply unfair of your government to put this legislation through without being absolutely clear with the people in respect of standards. And can I ask you a straight question? Will there be a grant scheme? Will there be assistance for families where they find that in order to protect the water table and the quality of water, that they do in fact have to upgrade?
Thank you, Deputy.
The least rural Ireland can expect from your government is help and assistance on this matter. It's not sufficient to simply rush it through this House.
Tánaiste, please.
Well, first of all, let's talk about fairness. First of all, it is certainly not fair that the taxpayers of this country would have to be in a position after the 3rd of February of facing daily fines because of the failure of previous government, because of the failure of previous government to have dealt with this since 2009. This has to be dealt with, and it is being dealt with now. I think that Deputy McDonald is confusing the kind of thing that is included in primary legislation and the kind of detailed regulations which are subsequently made in secondary legislation. The inspection regime in this case, in respect of the septic tanks regime, is an inspection regime that will be under the EPA, who have a long experience of inspections, of environmental control, of doing their work in a very reasonable way. And I think what's unfair is not what is in the legislation. I think what is unfair is the approach that is being taken by some members of the House, who are frightening elderly people in particular, that they're going to be caught with all kinds. I mean, doing a kind of, using it to whip up. using it to whip up fears for political advantage. This legislation has to be put in place by the 3rd of February. Everybody knows that. The charge that is in it is a very reasonable charge, and the inspection regime, which will imply the inspection regime which will be in place will be a reasonable inspection regime under the Environment Protection Agency. And in the meantime, I would urge deputies not to be whipping up the fears of people who have nothing, who really have nothing to fear at all from this legislation.
Thank you, Deputy Joe Higgins. Deputy's question. I'm sorry, no. Sorry, we're out. No, Deputy Joe Higgins. I'm sorry. Resume your seat, please, Deputy. No, Deputy, no. No, but, resume your seat. Resume your seat, Deputy. Deputy, I want to say something. Deputy, no. Resume your seat, Deputy. Resume your seat. Deputy, resume your seat. Deputy, the chair's on his feet. The chair is on his feet, Deputy. Deputy Ferris. Deputy Ferris, please resume. The chair's on his feet. You're out of order. Sit down. Deputy, I have something to say. Deputy, resume your seat. Deputy, if you don't resume your seat. Deputy Ferris. Deputy, if you don't resume your seat, Deputy, resume your seat or leave the house. Deputy, will you resume your seat? Will the deputy resume the seat? Deputy, resume your seat. I'm not, the chair is on his feet. You know the rules, Deputy. Resume your seat. Resume your seat, Deputy. Last time, Deputy, resume your seat. But then, Deputy, I have to ask you to leave the house. Please leave the house. Deputy Ferris. Deputy Joe Higgins, please. I don't. Look at. Deputy. Sorry. Deputy Joe Higgins is on his feet. I know. Deputy Joe Higgins. Deputy. We will discuss that later on, Deputy. Deputy Joe Higgins.
It's out of order,
Now withdraw that comment. I'm not protecting you, Deputy. Deputy Joe Higgins. I want to make some time. Joe Higgins. Deputy Higgins. Look, that's the end of it, Deputy.